All right, what's up everyone? I wanted to show you guys how I generally take my OP1 tracks and bring them into Ableton and chop them up and do stuff with them. I actually had some serious issues recording this the first time around, so I've actually already finished the track and I'll get to showing that off in a little bit. I wanted to show the whole process, but that's not going to work this time around. So I will show you how I get my stuff into Ableton and get it ready to go. I've already pulled over all my OP1 source stuff, and what I'm going to be working with are these 4 tape tracks. And if you drag them into Ableton just like this, without pushing any buttons, then they're going to try to put them all on one track, but we don't want that. We want them all on individual tracks. So if you hold down Control, there you go. So they're all going to warp at different lengths. That's not good. First of all, let's go ahead and set our tempo to what the original track was at in the OP1, which was 70. I'm going to turn warp off on all of these for now, so that they all should be the same length. You'll notice that Ableton puts the start time at, I think, what it considers the strongest first transient, and that's not always where we want them to be. We want them to be at the beginning, usually when we're dealing with full tracks like this. So yeah, if you go into each one and move this start arrow, you'll see that that's the case. At this point, you can warp. After you've made those changes to where the start time was and had turned off warp, turning it back on with the right tempo, you'll have everything kind of where you need it to be already, and these should all be at the beginning still. All right, so you got your tracks in here. They are warped to the original tempo. Then what? Well, then I start chopping things up, because the way that I record stuff in the OP1 loop sessions is that I will go and record discreetly on each tape track things that I know I'm going to want for later to use. You know, some of these tracks might be mostly bass. You know, in the case of track 4, it's obviously all drums, but I usually try to keep my bass on track 3 and chop it up if I need to. There are some things here that aren't bass, like I know that this isn't bass and this isn't bass, and that's probably not bass too. So basically what you want to do is, if you've recorded like I have, you kind of go through and you start making little chops here and there based on the loops that you've created, so that you can give them all an individual channel and process them accordingly. And as you'll see in the finalized products, there's a lot of processing that I do to this stuff. So when you've got all your stuff, you know, chopped up, then you can start making new tracks and, you know, discreetly pulling this stuff into new tracks. You know, like if it's a different type of instrument, you put it in a different track. You can pan it, you can add compression and EQ, and all this stuff's really important when it comes to creating a finished product. The OP1 is really capable, and you can actually make really good sounding stuff in it. But I personally, a lot of the times, like to bring things into Ableton and get that extra layer of control. So we're gonna switch to the finalized session, and I'll walk you through what I did with that thing. So we'll be back in a second. All right, here is the final track. I will be putting this all mastered and happy in the YouTube video at the end, or in a SoundCloud link or something like that. But as you can see, we've done a lot of work here from just having 4 tape tracks to begin with. There are no additional synthesizers that have been added to this, but what there are a lot of more drums. I felt as I started to put this thing together that it needed a little bit more push and oomph in the drums, and as the track took shape more and more, you know, I sort of gave it a whole nother drum kit and stuff like that. So I guess let's start at the top. If you've watched part 1 of this video, you've heard some of the sample sources that came through. So this sample is the original choral sample that I sampled from the record. And it filters and changes throughout, depending on you know, what we need from the track. I've added a fair amount of scoop out of the mids here to give it, or the low mids to give it more room in the mix. This one is apparently doing nothing. I tend to throw the CLA stuff onto tracks a lot of the times coming out of the OP1, just because sort of adds this little zhuzh that is hard to really explain, but it kind of just amps things up a little bit. And then I've got a reverb on this thing to give it a little bit more space, super stereo, pretty wet too. That's without the reverb, or excuse me, that's with the reverb. And that's without. So that's been chopped up and reapportioned throughout. This track, I do not believe is actually the choral sample. Yeah, so this is actually the raspy pad that I recorded on the OP1 that has been reapplied as like a dive effect throughout. I use it to build here and there. So we do that by going into the clip transform thing here, which you can get to by E. And you can, do modulation on each clip with envelopes and stuff like that in this view. So it's helpful to mangle samples and turn them into things that they might not have been before, which is what we're doing right here. If you are going to do these kind of smooth pitch things, you're going to want to make sure that the thing is on complex, anything but beats, basically, for the warp mode. So we've got that here and there to sort of add a nice divey thing. Guitarish. This was that layered guitarish sound that I did a couple layers of. Nothing real special going on here. I actually removed a lot of the processing that I had. Again, a little CLA guitar just to give it something, but not a ton of stuff going on here. Effect. Okay, so this actually goes with the that dive. This is a completely dry version of it. Get stuck in to sort of do a quick sweep up going into the dive. The Love Poem track is that vinyl source that was Love Poems. And it just kind of comes in the beginning as a texture. Later on, the same track is used to have this little high melody. We have a bandpass filter, and then we have some gain automation throughout, depending on what's going on. Here is that same rasped pad that we use as an effect up here, but these two channels have been hard panned left and right. The OP1, your panning options aren't really that great, so that's one of the reasons I love bringing things into Ableton, is because you can really mess around with the panning and make things big, wide, and do all kinds of crazy stuff like that. So this group here has a lot of different things in different places depending on what's going on. Not really that complex, I guess. I mean, we got a sidechain and we got taking out some of these low mids again. Doing this a lot more too is taking this stuff up on 10K, because in these giant mixes that get really, really compressed afterwards, these frequencies can hurt. So I've been taking those out more and more. You hear that sidechain working there. There's that auto pan again. I found that it was really cool once the swing got turned up to actually just do some straight triplet work with this. And that's what you're hearing right now. Later on, we get a little just more straight up distorted. I believe this is actually the same clips from that guitarish group up here, just run through a different set of processing. I use overdrive a lot in my sessions because it brings out harmonics that weren't there before. It's kind of like a hammer instead of a scalpel, but it works really well for these kinds of mixes for me. So all these audio sources you're hearing are from the OP1 session that we recorded earlier the other day. The only thing that's new is the drums, but you can see by chopping stuff up and putting it in different places and changing it and reversing it and all that kind of stuff that you can get some cool sounds. And then we can turn on that auto pan, which is set to the 24 note value, and we get that cool triplet thing going on. All right, so remember the terrible vocals that I recorded? They have been heavily processed, just like I promised. We have 3 individual tracks of vocals. There's a main one, which is going to have like the main vocal line and a bunch of other stuff. And then we have 2 supporting vocal channels that are going to sort of reiterate things that the main line is doing. And I dropped this Max for Live device on. It's an auto-tune device. I really wanted a synthetic sound to the vocals, so that's the first step. We always like to DS because S frequencies are harsh and we don't need them. This auto pan's doing nothing. The flanger comes in here and there to give just a little bit of movement. CLA vocals, there's the CLA again. I did not really get very surgical with processing the vocals, and the CLA is sort of a quick, easy thing to throw on and get some of the effects that you're looking for, plus that sort of magic dust. You know, it is what it is. There was a lot of harshness up here, and I really needed nothing down here at all. These vocals sound very radio-y, as you'll hear in a second.
Would you talk about sun's warm, sun's fire?
I love the whole, you know, use vocals as instruments, cut them up, slice them, repitch them, change the formants, all that kind of fun stuff. So we got a lot of that going on. I would recommend, if you're going to record directly into the OP1 microphone, that you use a windscreen or a pop filter in front of your voice, because there was a lot of noisy wind sound on my vocal that I did not need. And it's kind of weird sounding. I mean, sometimes it actually adds to it. Let me see if I can find one of the clips. So you hear that crunchiness? That's because there was basically just, you know, breath going directly into the OP1 microphone, and you know, that's not great all the time. This vocal melody was the one that was recorded with bending a vocal sample. It's actually pretty straight. I use it in a big build section, and again, CLA guitar. Fair amount of delay here on ascend too. In the beginning, as we start to bring the vocals in, I really wanted a lot of textures, and this vocal sped group is 2 instances of the main vocals that have been reversed and panned and added reverb to them, stuff like that. Okay. So do you hear that sort of fizz? That's the grain delay, and it sounds really cool on lots of different types of instruments, and we're using it as a send here that we can send things to. It's sort of like almost like an instant glitch sometimes. Next on the list is this music box sound, which I really, really love. It's a default in the OP1 sampler plugin. We're using it here and there. It's one of the only other rhythmic melodic things that we recorded in the OP1, so it gets a lot of treatment. I have 3 instances of it because there were 3 original tracks, and I have 2 hard panned. And the great thing about audio is that you can just change the pitch of it, change the transients of it, reverse it, do whatever you want. So I have, you know, you can take the same line and reverse it and put it next to each other, and you have something very interesting. I like that. Later on, it makes an appearance with a bit of delay that gives it more of a triplet feel. And repitched and relooped in some cases to just be a simpler line. Doesn't always need to be so progressive. The bass got split into 2 duplicate things. I realized there was a lot of really rich harmonics in the bass. You know, hear all that stuff going on. So I tried to make one bass that was really subby, and then to give the track a little bit more interest, I split the other one out into something that got processed as more of a high-mid thing. Reamped it through the CLA guitar plugin, sidechain, and some very surgical EQ to really just knock out anything I didn't really want to hear. All right, drums. I took the the original OP1 drum line, and that's what these samples are. All three of these drums here are the original OP1 drums, and they got very chopped and reordered. This is the most dry one of all of them. Let's see if I can find the hi-hats. All right, so there's the OP1 drum loop as we recorded in the OP1 video originally. But it's been pushed way in the background. Like it's almost just like an additional loop at this point. Bass and highs were taken out. This is something that I'll do if I want something to be stereo when it's not. If you throw a simple delay onto any channel and put it 100% when, it doesn't have to be 100, but for the extreme version of the effect, 100% when's good. Turn off sync so that you have the time value, and then start changing these two values. And since it's stereo and it's 100% wet, you'll go from mono to false stereo just by adding that little bit of delay on there. So that's kind of cool. So that was the most unmangled version of the OP1 drums. Throughout, this drum here is obviously it's the same drum loop, but it's been reversed. We have a saturator really crunching it, some really tight delay processing to give it some effects like a flanger almost. At least when it's very low. All right, and that right there, that turned out to be sort of like one of the most important sounds in the whole thing. It's the same drum loop, it's just really, really pumped up. I changed the sequence BPM to make it really, really long, and by doing that and changing it to a non-beats warp mode, you can get some really crazy effects. This guy is basically just reduxed, saturated, and filtered. So from here down, these are all new drums. And the drum kit sort of turned into a big, I don't even want to use the word dubstep, but that was, dubstep and trap were kind of influential in how this thing was put together in terms of certain sounds. That big kind of post dubstep-y rock and roll sound. I don't know. On the drum channel itself, we are compressing the heck out of it with an API compressor, which I generally like the sound of for drums. We're giving it some saturation to bring it together, and we're using the Pultec EQ to knock out some of those highs to give it a bit more of an organic sound. So we have that little tom accent, which is just a stock couple samples from Ableton, the 606 tom. And sometimes this little guy, which probably has the best tom name in the entire world, Baby Whale. Baby Whale Tom and I are going to be friends forever now that I know that it exists. Good job, Baby Whale. Baby Whale, where are you? In the drum group itself, I've decided to stick most stuff, but there are some drums that sit outside of it. A couple hats, basically. And there's some pitch modulation going on here and there with these, where in the sampler itself, simpler, if you go into controls, see this transposition value right here, you can automate that. And it gets a little messy just from a UI perspective because there's such a big range that you can go. But here you see that this little guy's automated. And if we go down here, fun stuff. Not as fun as Baby Whale, but not everything can be. Almost at the end here. This record noise is very, very quiet in the background. False stereo on it as well. It's just to give things a little bit of texture throughout. You know, a couple people who have done videos, including deadmau5, have talked about sticking noise in the back of their tracks, and I believe in that as well. This particular track wanted a record noise because of the vinyl sampling we were doing. So that's just there. I don't even know if you can actually hear it in the main mix at this point, but it was instrumental in sort of bringing things together earlier on when I was working on the mix. As I was nearing the end of putting this thing together, I felt like it needed just a couple more melodic things here and there. I wanted to see if I had accidentally left something out from the OP1 sessions. So I brought all 4 tracks back in and ended up just sort of layering them in the background. And it actually added quite a bit. So we got the drums down here. The bass isn't really in here. It's mostly the melodic stuff. It's just sitting back here, super hard panned. Here's the choir. Not really a lot going on here except some automation. Now you get to hear that grain delay really doing its work. It sounds like it's like chewing on itself. That's it for audio. That's the last thing we have down here is a sidechain. The way that I sidechain is by taking a kick and muting it, and then just layering out the whole track wherever I need it. And then any compressors that are using the sidechain compression, if you need sidechain on something on the compressor, you pull from that channel, which conveniently named sidechain, but you want to make sure that you're pulling pre-effects because that way it's ignoring the utility plugin that's making it silent. Fun stuff. Fun stuff. I'm going to go ahead and put this track at the end of this video, and I'm really glad that you guys stopped by to listen to this. If you have any questions or comments, or let me know if you thought this was terrible, just let me know. And I appreciate it. Y'all take care. Bye.